Welcome to episode 13 of Idiom America, back after a bit of a break. I want to get back to the series of idioms involving U.S. presidents, but with Thanksgiving coming up tomorrow, I wanted to take a look at some idioms connected with that holiday. So let's start by talking some turkey. As you know, to talk turkey means to discuss something honestly and directly, frankly and practically. When you're talking turkey, you're getting to the point. To the meat of the matter, one might even say, often when you're discussing a business or political deal. And the first use of this one I can find is in the New York Mirror in 1837, although the Mirror is contemporaneously quoting the Oneida Democrat, and so it seems like this one was popping up in a lot of newspapers around that time. At any rate, according to the newspaper, the origin story of talking some turkey comes from the bartering between colonists and Native Americans, and it tells it this way, quote, "An Indian and a white man went a-shooting in partnership, and a wild turkey and a crow were all the results of the day's toil. The white man, in the usual style of making a bargain with the Indian, proposed a division of the spoils in this way. 'Now, wampum, you may have your choice. You take the crow, and I'll take the turkey. Or, if you'd rather, I'll take the turkey, and you take the crow.' Wampum reflected a moment on the generous alternative thus offered, and replied, 'Ugh, you no talk turkey to me a bit,' unquote. Kind of an outdated, possibly offensive retelling there, and I didn't realize that apparently it used to be common to refer to Native Americans as wampum, which, as you know, are the small cylindrical beads traditionally made by some North American Indian peoples from shells strung together and worn as decoration or used as money. At any rate, the idea there is that the white man's trying to cheat the Indian, so he's not actually talking turkey to him, because talking turkey would mean honestly sitting down to discuss a square business deal. And so the Indian's telling him that, he's not talking turkey to him. Then that seems like a likely origin to me, as there was a fair bit of trade centered around the supply of wild turkeys from Native Americans. But there are those who suggest that it came about from the nature of family conversation gathered around the Thanksgiving dinner table. In his Devil's Dictionary, Ambrose Bierce defines turkey as, quote, "a large bird whose flesh, when eaten on certain religious anniversaries, has the peculiar property of attesting piety and gratitude. Incidentally, it is pretty good eating." So why do we eat turkey on Thanksgiving? Because eat it we do. Nearly 90% of Americans eat the bird on Thanksgiving, which works out to about 50 million birds eaten, all for that one day. The letters and records about that famous occasion when the colonists first sat down with the Wampanoag Indians in 1621, the historical meal that later would become known as the first Thanksgiving, they mention that beef and fowl were on the menu, but they don't specifically mention turkeys. But there were certainly wild turkeys about, and there's a letter by a pilgrim by the name of Edward Winslow that mentions a turkey hunting trip before that Thanksgiving meal. So that could be it. Another theory that I don't place much stock in attributes the Thanksgiving turkey to the Queen of England. During the 16th century, a fleet of Spanish ships sunk on their way to attack England, and according to legend, Queen Elizabeth received this news while eating dinner and was so thrilled that she ordered another goose to be served. And some historians say that the early settlers were inspired by the Queen's actions and roasted turkey instead of a goose. As I say. But whatever the origin, by the turn of the 19th century, turkey had become a popular dish to serve on those Thanksgiving-like celebrations. And there were a few reasons for this. First, it was plentiful. It's been estimated that there were at least 10 million turkeys in America at the time of European contact. And second, turkeys on a family farm were almost always available for slaughter because they weren't as useful as animals like cows and hens that give milk and eggs. And finally, a single turkey was usually big enough to feed a family. Nevertheless, turkeys, they weren't yet synonymous with Thanksgiving that early on. And some people have credited Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol from 1843 with kind of furthering this idea that turkey is a holiday meal. And some attribute it to the writer, Sarah Josepha Hale, who in her 1827 novel Northwood devoted an entire chapter to a description of a New England Thanksgiving with a roasted turkey placed at the head of the table. And about the same time, Ms. Hale also began campaigning to establish Thanksgiving as a national holiday in the United States, which she believed would help unify the country as it headed toward civil war. And her efforts finally paid off in 1863 when Abraham Lincoln issued a presidential proclamation proclaiming Thanksgiving a national holiday. So that makes a lot of sense to me as kind of the definitive origin. At any rate, the wild turkey is indeed native to North America, which does make it a particularly suitable bird for celebrating one of the most native of holidays. And as you probably heard, Benjamin Franklin actually claimed that the turkey made a more suitable national bird for the United States than the bald eagle, and he pushed for that. And I think that all those designers of seals for all those government agencies that include the eagle are probably pretty grateful that Franklin didn't win out there, as picturing turkeys in all these seals strikes me as a tall task. But even though the turkey indisputably comes from North America, in particular Mexico, where they were first domesticated, they're called turkeys, suggesting an origin with the country turkey. And in fact, linguists posit this country turkey connection as an origin for the word. One theory is that when the Europeans first encountered turkeys in America, they incorrectly identified the birds as a type of guinea fowl, which were already being imported into Europe by turkey merchants, or merchants from Turkey via Constantinople, and that they were therefore nicknamed turkey cocks with a capital T, and that the name then got shortened to turkey fowl or Indian turkeys, which was then shortened to just turkeys. Second theory says that it came from the fact that turkeys often didn't come to England directly from the Americas, but via merchant ships from the Middle East, where they were domesticated successfully. And again, the importers lent their name to the bird, hence turkey cocks and turkey hens, and soon after, turkeys. Interestingly, other languages use an assumed Indian origin, meaning the subcontinent India, for turkey, such as French, Polish, and Russian, which calls them Indushka, or bird of India. And these are thought to arise from the supposed belief of Christopher Columbus that he had reached India rather than the Americas on his voyage. And I was always interested as a boy by the connection between the name of the country, Turkey, and the name of the bird. And one sentence I was particularly fond of used the countries Hungary, Turkey, Greece, and China. And it went something along the lines of, when you're hungry, there's nothing better than a turkey with all its grease served up in the finest of China. And I'm not sure if that's something I came up with or whether I picked that up somewhere. Another turkey idiom is to go cold turkey, or to suddenly stop a bad habit and suffer from it at the beginning. And there are those that suggest that this one is tied to talking turkey, that because talking turkey means frank or direct talk, that to quit something cold turkey means to quit something in a similar manner with similar directness. Others point to a piece of fiction in an 1877 UK satirical magazine where one John Holmes, Esquire and noted miser, is served cold turkey by his cousin Clara with his pudding day after day instead of a roasted and dressed turkey, until he finally is fed up, so to speak, and he cuts Clara out of his will. And the hypothesis is that word spread around London and eventually into the U.S. about how Hume had given Clara the cold turkey treatment. And the origin story that makes the most sense to me, however, that seems to have contributed most to the spread of this one, has to do with the piloerection, or goosebumps, that come with abrupt withdrawal from opioids, and how this resembles the skin of a plucked, refrigerated turkey. And incidentally, the similar term, kick the habit, alludes to the muscle spasms that occur in addition to goosebumps in some cases of opioid withdrawal. And right about 1920, 1921, this phrase started to pop up a lot in the media, quick cold turkey, when describing such drug withdrawals and treatment for them, and it seems to have spread from there. And lots of people say you can't have turkey without stuffing, which is probably the most common Thanksgiving side dish. And if you stuff your face with the stuff, there's no doubt you're going to end up feeling stuffed and leaning back when someone offers you another slice of pumpkin pie and declining, no thanks, I'm stuffed. And the idiom stuff your face is straightforward enough, but what about the idiom to be stuffed, meaning to be really full? That's pretty straightforward too, but where's this one come from? Some have pointed to the practice of taxidermy, which to me seems to have more of a connection with that British idiom, get stuffed, meaning to rudely tell someone to go away, leave you alone. I don't know. To me, there's a natural connection with being stuffed and Thanksgiving and stuffing a turkey and then later oneself. And I think that could have something to do with it as much of anything. And another way of saying to stuff one's face is to gobble up or gobble down, I suppose, all the yummy Thanksgiving dishes. And as we all know, the most famous characteristic vocalization of the turkey is also gobble gobble. So it seems like there should be a connection there somehow with turkeys and gobbling up the food on your Thanksgiving plate. And there might be, but the word gobble, in the sense of eating something quickly or greedily, has an origin more ancient than the turkey's appearance in Europe, as its first known usage in this sense dates to 1583, and it probably comes from the old word gobbin, which means to drink something greedily. And it's possible that gobble in this sense had something to do with gobble being known as the sound turkeys make, which came about in the late 17th century, but it's more likely that gobble gobble is just onomatopoeic in origin, that it's just meant to describe the sound a turkey makes, like cock-a-doodle-doo for roosters. I don't know. I'll let you be the judge, as here's the sound of a turkey making the gobble gobble noise. I don't know, not an exact match by any means, but I can see it. I can kind of hear a gobble gobble in there. Finally, it's worth noting that male turkeys, or toms, are often called gobblers. Female turkeys are just called hens, and juvenile males, they're called jakes, and juvenile females are called jennies, which is kind of cool to have jakes and jennies for the different genders for the juveniles. Anyway, unlike geese, there's a big difference between the gobblers with their beards and their red, white, and blue bare heads and their colorful tail fan displays, and the hens, which are half the size and dull gray brown in color, with none of the distinguishing marks we typically think of when we think of turkeys. Anyway, back to being stuffed. One way to avoid feeling stuffed is to eat like a bird. And this one dates to the first half of the 1900s, and it alludes to the idea that birds eat very little, which is, of course, mistaken, as it takes a lot of energy to keep those wings fluttering and that body warm. And so birds actually eat a large amount relative to their body weight. In contrast to something like a horse, for example, we have the idiom eat like a horse, which dates to the early 1700s. Honorary mention here is the self-evident idiom, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. And also worth mentioning here is the idiom stuffed shirt, which refers to a pompous, self-satisfied, or boring or overly formal person. No real Thanksgiving connection here, other than if you have the misfortune to have a few of these stuffed shirts around your Thanksgiving table, I suppose. And this expression, it appears to allude to a shirt stuffed with paper as opposed to a real person, and it dates to the early 20th century. Although Shakespeare had the same idea in his play Much Ado About Nothing, when he referred to someone as no less than a stuffed man, implying that the person was so full of himself that he was in fact quite empty. At any rate, you can't have turkey and stuffing without gravy, although I wouldn't go so far as to say the rest is gravy, as there's at least pumpkin pie to come, if nothing else. This idiom, the rest is gravy, has two distinct meanings. First, it can mean that the rest of some project or process will be very easy and straightforward to complete, as in we did the hard part, the rest is gravy. Second, it can mean that additional elements are an unexpected or unrequired bonus, as in I'm earning my investment back and the rest is gravy. Some say that this phrase originated from an Old English saying that explained that life basically is meat and potatoes and the luxuries are gravy. Now that makes sense, but I can't really track this one down for sure. But it also connects to another gravy idiom, to ride the gravy train, where a gravy train is a job or other source of income that generates abundant money with little effort. And this one was invented in the 1920s by railroad men to describe a run in which there was good pay with little work. Some suggest that before there was the gravy train, there was the gravy boat, which was a pun on the small boat-shaped pitcher of gravy found on many dinner tables that was known as a gravy or sauce boat. But gravy in this sense shows up a lot in the slang of the 19th century theater. For example, gravy was either a very easy role or some easily earned laughter or applause from the audience. Finally, it's worth noting that one of the oldest gravy metaphors is stewing one's own gravy, which appeared in the late 17th century and meant to suffer the consequences of one's own poor judgment or bad behavior. Which finally brings us to the pie, and to my idea that the phrase as American as apple pie got it wrong, and that it should be as American as pumpkin pie instead, as that, to me, seems by far the more distinctively American pie variety, along with perhaps pecan and blueberry or even huckleberry pie, because unlike the apple, pecans, pumpkins, blueberries, huckleberries, they're all native to North America, unknown to the colonists before they came here. Anyway, some suggest that this one, American as apple pie, has something to do with Johnny Appleseed, etc. But apple idioms are an episode for another day, because although an apple pie may make an appearance at the Thanksgiving table, it's not the star of the pie show. And that's, of course, the pumpkin pie, something that likely was eaten at those first Thanksgivings, as this was something that those early American settlers of the Plymouth colony were known to make from 1621 on. At any rate, thus concludes this little idiomatic tour through a Thanksgiving dinner. So thanks for listening. And here's to hoping our eyes aren't bigger than our stomachs this Thanksgiving.